Okay, now that I've shown you the basics of ZBrush and everything you need tool-wise and brush-wise to get started on making some sculpts, and you can see I actually put it all in this 2-hour plus video, this Introduction to Digital Sculpting version 2, and I'll link that in the description for that. So if you go through that, it's going to show you all the different tools and techniques. I've got it broken up into different chapters, so if you get confused on any part, you can go back to that. But now that we know that information, and if you've taken a look at it, what we're going to do now is take a look at some best practices to quickly make some faces and some of the shapes that are necessary to build the face. So we'll take a look at building a quick nose and maybe a quick mouth, how we can attack eyes, and some strategies for doing some ears. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is just start a brand new project. So if you're just loading ZBrush, you should see the lightbox. And if you don't, you can click this lightbox tab right here, or you can hit the comma key, and that'll pull up and down the lightbox. So what I like to do is go to projects, and I like to use the Dynasphere 128. You can see there's a couple of them, but they have different numbers, 32, 64, 128. We've already looked at that. That is the resolution of those projects for this Dynasphere. So let's just put on this Dynasphere 128. Double click that. I'm not going to save the project. I've already saved it. Okay, the next thing I want to do is tap X, and I'm going to turn on symmetry. Okay, we've already looked at the various different brushes and the hotkeys, so I've set up hotkeys 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you might see me swapping between there. I'll try to call out what I'm using. So I'm just going to use the standard brush, and again, we've looked at the use of lazy mouse and how we can use that, but then if we have on the standard brush, if we tap L, we can turn lazy mouse off for that. So I'm just going to build a little nose structure. So what I'm going to do is just click and drag out and just kind of go in a circular motion like this. Everything's the default on there for intensity, so if I tap U, I can get the intensity slider set to 25, and if I tap S or hold down S, the size of my brush is like 100 or so. So I'm just going to keep pulling this out here, and if you remember, if you hold down Shift, that turns that into a smooth, like that. So I'm going to smooth that back, and if you remember from the earlier video, we can hold down Control and then drag in the open viewport, and I usually do that twice. If there's a mask on there, that releases the mask, and then that remeshes. We can turn on the polyframe, which is Shift F, or we can come over here and turn that on so we can tell that there's a change in the geometry. Now I'll just come over here to the corner for some nostrils. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger and then just barely tap along there. So I'm not going to try to make too big of a shape. I'll hold down Shift and then smooth that back out like that. And I do think I would like a little bit more resolution on this already. So I'm going to go to Geometry, open that up, go to Dynamesh, and remember we started that sphere with a 128. So we can pump that up to maybe, I'm going to go 256, and then I'm going to remesh. Sometimes it doesn't remesh for me, so I have to just hold down Shift, maybe smooth some little tiny part of the model, and then remesh, and you can see it's going to do that for us. So just get in the habit of that. And then whenever we up-res, it's going to look not so great. So I usually hold down Shift and then just lightly tap on the model to, smooth that out. So we've got more polygons to work with. Now I'm going to switch over to the Damien Standard. I do have a hotkey for number 2 for that. And then I can come within through here. I'll make my brush size a bit larger. I'm going to use this to carve out forms. So yeah, the brush is going to be around 130 or so, something like that. And then the default for this brush digs in. So I can draw along there. It's got lazy mouse turned on automatically for you. If you don't, you can tap L to turn that on and off. So I just dig in for that shape like that a little bit. I'm going to pull up from the corners and I'm being like very, very light with the brush on this for this part here. Okay, and then I'm going to dig in even more in here to start building the nostril shapes. I'm going to smooth this out down here, and then I'll remesh again. And if we want to build something like nasal labial folds, we can pull out from here, and then I'm just going to Shift and then smooth out the results of this just a little bit within through there, like that. So you can see we got this here, and I'm going to remesh one more time. Now, if you want to define the nose a little bit more, we could tap 4, we could put it on the move brush, and I'm going to do some proportional stuff here. So I might pull this corner in, maybe raise the nostril up. So this is where you get to play around and have some fun and really change the overall shape of this. So if you wanted to make a really, nose that sticks out pretty far, I'm coming up to the side here like that. I'm going to pull it out just a little bit like that, and I want my nose to be kind of bulbous on the outer part, so I'm just gonna pull here like that, and I'll remesh. I'm gonna do some smoothing down here to kind of get rid of that weird kind of surface that we got going on there, and then I might need to go back to Damien Standard and start to dig in, because I pull the nose out. If I really want to build that nostril structure up, then I need to start really digging into the nose area, and then I'll just remesh like that. And if you want, I'm going to take the Damien Standard, make it pretty large, and hold down Alt, and then this way I can build up an edge. So if you've ever seen maybe some people with their noses that's maybe got a little bit of a ridge there, you could do that. If you wanted to do this kind of look within through here, you could maybe pull up through that. So it's pretty cool if you start to be observant of other people's noses and you get some reference on that. You're going to see everybody, just like your fingerprint, everybody's nose is quite a bit different shape-wise and things like that, So it really depends on what you're trying to build on there like that. Now we could also use the inflate brush if we wanted to really blow these surfaces up and have more of a cartoonish kind of look. So that's another thing that you could do for that. So I think I'm going to leave my nose right here in this vicinity like this. I might take my resolution and go up just a little bit higher. Now I do think if you're new to all this, be careful about how much resolution you add. I don't want you adding too much resolution too quickly. It will just make your life a little bit more difficult. So again, I'm going to go Damien Standard, and I'm just going to come around through here like this, and then define this just a little bit more. And I think that'll be pretty good for this. I'm going to hold down Alt and drag out, hold down Shift just to build that surface out a little bit more like that, and then maybe push this in through here. And I think that'll be good for this part, and I'll stop the video and then we'll take a look at making them out. Okay, let's take a look at making lips. So I'm going to use the Damien Standard brush, and I'm going to make the brush pretty large. And you can see if I tap S, I'm at about 170, somewhere in there, 130, 170, somewhere in there. And then now I'm going to, because this brush digs in, I'm going to do a shape that I think feels kind of like if you've ever drawn like birds on a piece of paper, like far off in the distance. It's kind of like this little V shape that comes up like this and then pulls down and curls up. So we've got that. That's going to give us the basis of the shape of our lips where they come together. Now, because this brush digs in by default, I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to drag right along here and then come here and then just kind of taper off the intensity of that. I'm going to do the same thing down here, so I'm going to hold down Alt and then click and drag out and then let off a little bit. And you can smooth the results whenever you're done with that, but that should give you something that's pretty good for the shape of the lips. Now I'll make my brush size a little bit smaller, and I'll just come in here with the Damien Standard, and you can see that I'll try to redraw in through there and just kind of push that in a little bit and maybe remesh. Now the other thing you can do, that this is going to be kind of flat, if we come up to the side view, you might want to take something like the move brush and then maybe pull out that bottom lip a little bit and then work your way around visibly to rotate around to see the actual curvature of that. So I'm going to pull this out a little bit more. I'm going to pull this out here, pull this here. So it's not completely flat. I know we're building this on a sphere, but I'm trying to give a little bit more rounding going along through this entire area. So the other thing I'm going to do is just give myself a little bit of a chin like that. So I'm just going to pull out with a pretty decent sized brush, and I'll pull down here just a little bit like that for these moves, and I'll just hold down Shift and smooth out the results, and then I'll just go ahead and remesh, and you can see that's going to go pretty good. Last thing I'll show you is we could use the inflate brush, and if you wanted to really, you know, pump up the lips and put some filler in there or whatever you call that, you can just kind of blow this up like a balloon and let that intersect the top and the bottom. I'm just being kind of light with this, and now I can hold down Control and then remesh like that. Now that might destroy the line that you had there, so if you do something like that, you might want to come back with the Damien standard and just lightly kind of draw along through there like that on there. Now if you did want to do this, you could use clay buildup, and you could put this in the maybe in the corners here. There is like a little bit of a muscle structure there, and you could just smooth that out to build just a little bit of the semblance of that surface coming up there. Again, this is going to be, it's going to be different depending on every, you know, if it's a male, female, if it's just depending on facial type, stuff like that, right? And if it is a male, then you might have a little bit more of this kind of meat right down in here, and you might start to get the semblance that maybe if I drew the lines for you, you could see what this would be, something like that. But it's going to be more hinted and implied, right? So I'll just smooth that out right there like that. So this will be a little bit nondescript. And again, this is a feature not everybody has, this little dimple through here on the lips, but I'll leave that up to you. Again, if you want to like maybe pull this out a little bit, I'm holding down Alt with the Damien standard and just let me hit on doing that. And then I might just lightly smooth that right there like that. Now if you want to get a little bit more detailed with this, you could just lightly drag along here like that. And we don't have enough resolution, so I'm not going to do tons of detail on there like that, but if we get the camera back a little bit, you can actually see those little striations or those indents within the lips on there. So that's how you can make some lips pretty quickly. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about creating eyes. So I'm going to use the Damien standard. I do want to talk to you about this, that there's a on a natural human face, we're just sculpting on a sphere right now, but normally there's definitely a sweet spot for where the eyes should fall on a character. So just something to keep in mind, if you were to make eyes and you made it too close to the center of the face, then that's going to look a little bit odd. And if they're too far out, it's going to look rather alien and strange. So there's definitely some kind of sweet spot for where the eyes should be. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to actually make two spheres of geometry so we can place the actual like eye sphere, and then we have that as a marker and we can build the eyelids around that. That's the way that I typically like to do it. Now it is possible that I could just do something like this. I could do a shape like this here. I could start to build up the eyelid around there, and then that could be a start for a placement on things. That is a possibility. And then I could place the eyeball within there. I'm going to show you a little bit of a different way of doing this. I'm going to hit undo to get back here. So I'm going to go to Subtool, and if you look at that previous video that I was talking about that goes over all the different tools and whatnot, we went over this, so this shouldn't be anything new. We're going to use the append, and we're going to append a sphere 3D. I'm going to go ahead and select this. If I want to rename it, I'll just call this eye. And I might as well go to the head real quick and just name this head if I'm just going to keep everything nice and straight. And then I can take this eye, I'll put it on the gizmo tool right up here like this, and I'll take this, I'll push it here. Now if you want, the geometry kind of flows in these pole coordinates, so you could rotate this. If I rotate it along here, hold down shift, I can snap it to 90 degrees. And I'll scale the eyeball down to about the size of what I think the eyeball should be for this. I'm going to go to a side view, just push it forward a little bit, then maybe push this over here. And again, I think maybe what I'll do is push it right about here. Okay, and then the other part of the video that I showed for this is we could duplicate this eye and we could have another version of it and then we could just mirror it across, but I like to have this all one object. So ZBrush has this functionality for mirror and weld, but it only mirrors and welds from one direction. Again, in the other video we took a look at that and there's a better explanation about that, but just to go quickly, I'm just going to mirror this across and then do a mirror and weld. Now, if I want to push and pull these around and I want to see what this looks like, you can see they're both moving right now. I don't have symmetry turned on, so I can tap X, and then now symmetry should be working. And if you get any weird behavior where it's still not moving the way that you would expect, where you're pushing this out and getting mirrored behavior that way, you might want to put this local sim on or off, depending for that. But I'm not having any issues, so I think this is going to be working pretty good for what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to actually push that eyeball within through there and maybe just have it poke through a little bit like that and through there. Okay, so that's going to give me the eyes. I'm going to go back up to the head, and then now this is going to allow me to sculpt around that eyeball and it won't affect that shape at all. So now I'm just going to take Damien Standard and I'm going to start digging in a little bit where I feel like maybe the tear duct is somewhere in through here and maybe the top of the eye is here. And so I'm trying to get this somewhat like almond shape for the eye. Okay, so you can see by just even doing the Damien Standard and then working our way around this, we're really starting to define that shape. And if I pull in the corner a little bit more, I'm going to pull, it's kind of an angle, like kind of coming down like that, right there. Okay, so that's fairly decent. We could remesh, and now what I'm going to do is hold down Alt, and I'm going to start to build up a ridge for the this lid right here, like that. And then I'm going to hold down Alt and do the same thing down here, just like that. And then if I want, we can take the move brush. You can tap 4 if you got the hotkeys that I provided for you for that. And then now we can start to manipulate this and move it around, and maybe we're tweaking the overall shape of this, and I can pull this maybe forward a little bit. Now you might see that surface poke through, and that's completely fine. What I am concerned about is having a nice consistent thickness for this eyelid working all the way around the spherical shape. I do feel like that's super important. If you wanted to take a look at some good eye reference, if you take a look at the sculpted version of the Michelangelo's David, I think that's a really good example of what you probably want to go for as far as forms go to build your eye and your lid structure. Okay, once that's done, I can put it on maybe clay buildup, hold on Alt, and I can just dig in here to push that back. So I'll just do this right through there. And again, everybody's eye shape is going to be a little bit different depending on what you're trying to do. If you have, you know, the top lid comes down a bit more, it's going to feel like maybe you've got a character that's maybe a little bit more sleepy or something like that, right? So that's going to have an effect on things. And if you pull this up really high, it's going to maybe make it feel like the character is surprised, or maybe you're doing something that feels a little bit more anime-like. So something else that we could do that I do think is kind of important about eyes. So this is just this like white membrane that's on there like that. And if I hit the solo button, I can hit Alt S. That's my hotkey that I set up for that. Or you can click the solo button like this here. Okay, and if I go to the side view on this, what I'm going to try to do is get some poly groups going, so I can maybe change this to a different color, or maybe we can see a mask on here or something like that. So if we do this, if I hold down Control and Shift and I use the select lasso, so if you hold down Control Shift, that actually exists within here. But if you have the interface that I gave you, should have that. My interface is actually going to look a little bit different. Let me load the interface I gave you all real quick. So I'm going to go to Preferences and I'm going to go Load UI, and I'm going to navigate to where that sits for me. Okay, sorry about that. Didn't realize I didn't have the simple UI that I am providing for this. So again, Control Shift, and if I come up here and we go to the Select Lasso, I actually have it down here for this. What this tool allows you to do, you can obviously hold down Control Shift and drag out a lasso like that. If I hold down Control Shift and click that again, and I'll turn that into this tool. But what is unique about this, if I turn on the polyframe, it lets you select edge loops. If you hold down Control Shift and you just select on an edge, it's going to select edge loops. So I can take away from this here. Oops, and let me hit undo. Let me get in a little bit closer, like this. And I need to make my brush size smaller. I'm just trying to select just those edges there. So it does get a little bit more difficult to select this sometimes, because if I select a face, that's a little bit different than selecting the edge on there. Okay, so I'm going to have that. If I hit Control W, that's going to make a poly group. We did look at that earlier as well. And if I bring everything back, I'm going to hold down Control Shift and just click here. What I'd like to do is put a mask on here, and just to see this, so if I hold down Control Shift, just click on that, hold down Control and tap in the viewport, and that's going to put a mask on it. And if I hold down Control Shift and then bring this back, I'll turn off the polyframe, and you can see what we've got here now, right? So I'll go back up to the face. I was hoping that would hold for that. Okay, I'm going to have to show you a little other trick. Okay, I'm going to hit Control I to inverse on that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this with a darker color like this. So I'm going to go to, I just changed this over here. Don't freak out, because this is going to change the color of the model. And then we can always put this back. But I'm going to put this down at a darker color like this. I'm going to go to Color, and I'm going to say Fill Object. And it's going to fill that area with that darker color. And now I can push this back up here to white, and then everything's back to where it was. I can get rid of the mask, and now you can see on this I've got that that's poly paint. It's getting a little more advanced than what I'd like to, but I just wanted to show you what that was going on for there. So why I think this is important is because knowing where the cornea and the pupil and everything sits on the eye makes a big difference for facial expressions and what you're building with that. So if I go tap S, I'm going to make my brush size a little bit smaller, and you can see I've really built an expression that looked rather kind of surprised, right? So if I want this to feel a bit more relaxed, I'm going to have to get the upper lid, needs to come down over the top of that, and you can see how that's going to start to make an eye that feels a whole lot more relaxed at that point. And this is changing also where should the tear duct be, where should the corner of this be, how far should this come back and through there. So now we have more information to work with. It changes quite a bit, and I've done this to myself quite a few times where I'm not really paying attention. I just have that clear membrane that we were working with at the very beginning, and then whenever it comes time to actually really make the shapes for the eyeball, I realized that maybe my eyelids were not having the right feeling or the right placement that I was looking for. So I'm going to just redo some of this and try to fix up the shapes just a little bit, try to make them look a little bit more appealing. So again, I'm holding down Alt and then pulling that shape out with this brush, and then I'm digging in here and then holding down Alt and then trying to make a nice consistent thickness of the lid throughout here like that. And then whenever I'm done, I can do this. I can put, this depends on the age, I can put this line down here and then maybe smooth that out, and then maybe I'll put a line up and through here and then maybe smooth that out just a little bit and then remesh. Now, again, depending on the ethnicity and then the age, you know, this line is going to be a bit higher. Now, if it was a oriental eye, the lid actually, that crease actually comes really close to this part here, so you end up not seeing it sometimes. So that changes structure quite a bit too. So it's all going to depend on like what is the character that you're building. Age range and things like that do play a part. So I'm just going to lightly smooth this out, just have the indent and hint of that. And sometimes you over sculpt this stuff and then smooth it out later to get like the shape that you're really hoping for. Okay, and I think that's looking pretty good. This is sticking out pretty far right there. So I'll just do that, and let's zoom out and then take a look. And again, this is what I was telling you about the eyes, where if we've got them too close together, that's going to look a bit odd. And then if you want it, like if I wanted to make this feel a little bit more natural, then I probably would need to start to push those out over there. And if I did that, what I can do is I'll have to put the move brush on here, and I'll make it a pretty decent size. And then I'll just have to refit those lids like this. So you've got tons of options to play with on this. Now you can see I'm refitting this, and it's not like I didn't like how far I was stretching across the eye over there. So now I'm pushing it over here, and I had to pull that forward. So you're always reshaping to the shape of that sphere. So I do think that's one of the advantages of using the sphere to build an eye. If you don't have that sphere, you're just kind of blindly guessing at what's the actual shape of that underneath of it. And then if you're going to do anything with this to like animate it or anything else like that, you do need a clean shape under there. So my time during characters, that's one thing that I learned, is try to get that shape in there as quickly as possible. Try to get the representation of the pupil and the cornea. And I know I just have, this is basically like the outer part of the eye, so it's not really doing anything on the inner part. So I don't really have a pupil on there, but that that'll give you some indication of what's going on there. So I could definitely spend a whole lot more time finessing this and trying to get this a little bit more clean, but I think this will give you everything that you need to get that overall shape. And because I am a perfectionist, I am going to just try to do this before I end this part of the video. I'm just going to clean that up just a little bit, right in through there, and then always be rotating around your model and then checking it from different vantage points. I do think that's pretty important for you to do that as well. So you can see I'm digging in here, and I'll put it on the move brush, and then just make sure I've got enough space around there. And we haven't really even touched on eyebrows, but you could start to build up the fatty tissue around the top of that and through there. And then maybe you just want to give yourself some kind of visual indicator of where the eyebrow is going to be. So like maybe I can just take Damien Standard and then just lightly put in some indicator of where that's going to be, like that. Okay, so that's going to give you the start of making some decent looking eyes on there. Let me come back here real quick, because you might be wondering about this part about filling with this. Let's go ahead and do this. I've got it on white. I can come up here to color, and let's just go ahead and dock this real quick, and take this and dock it over. Come on, dock it over. There we go, like that. And what I'm going to do is, whenever we go to fill with this, and if we're filling with RGB, you can take the intensity and drop that back a little bit. So I've got it on white, and I'm going to say fill object, and that's going to lighten that up just a little bit. And I'll put this back on 100%, and then I'm going to choose a darker color like this, and I'm just going to draw that darker pupil, but we can see we're working with RGB, and we also have sculpting on. We can turn the sculpting off and just work with the color. So I do have that on the Damien standard. You could do this on the standard brush as well. But if you wanted to maybe put just a little bit of color in there, you could start to do something like that. And maybe I'm doing something like this. Same thing with smoothing. If you hold down Shift, you could turn off Z add and you could just smooth the poly paint information on there. Now this is all dependent on the model resolution, so you can see it's pretty low res. Yeah, so I'm going to do that. Hold down Shift. I'm going to turn Z add back on, turn RGB off. I don't, just because I could throw us off a little bit later. So there we go for that, and I'll push this back up to white like that. And so then that's how you get a a better representation of maybe what that eye looks like at that point. So give that a go and try that out with your eyes and see what you come up with. Okay, the next thing we're going to take a look at is the ears, and the ears are actually pretty complicated. There's a couple different ways that we can go about doing this. I'm going to show you real quick this way. So in the previous video where we learned all the different tools and techniques inside of ZBrush, we learned how we can hold down Control and we can just draw a shape directly on the model for a mask. So what we could do is we could mask the ear shape. If we want to subtract from that, we can hold down Control Alt and subtract from that. So maybe my ear is just a little bit too large. And if we want to tighten this up, we can hold down Control Alt and click on there, and that'll tighten up the mask. And if you want to blur the mask, hold down Control and click on it. So I've got a nice tight shape like that. If I hold down Control and just tap once in here, that inverses it, or you can hit Control I. And what we can do at that point is we can put on the gizmo tool. If we turn on symmetry, if we go to this, if you hold down Alt and go to the unmasked mesh center, so let's turn off that. Let's turn off symmetry, or maybe I have it on. I'm not. Yeah, so I have it on. I'm sorry, I didn't have symmetry on at that time. So turn symmetry on and hold on Alt, and then we go to the unmasked mesh center. So it's going to put it in the center of this. Now to move the pivot point of this around, we can hold down Alt, and I can push this right here like that. And then what that's going to allow me to do is now rotate the shape out like this to start to give us our potato chip kind of thing. So this will work, and we can remesh and we can clean all this stuff up. That's all fine and dandy. So let's go ahead and get rid of the mask. Hold down Control, drag on here. I could remesh. Hold down Shift, start to smooth this out like that. And that will give us the beginning of the shape. We got to do some work on the back of the ear to get that going. Now the only thing I wanted to point out is it's possible that we could be using primitives, and we could be doing some stuff that way as well. So we've already looked at before how we can append a shape. So we can append, let's say, like a cylinder, and then we can put it on the gizmo tool. I'm going to rotate it like this, hold down Shift, and I can snap it to these rotational degrees, and I can scale it in this way, push it off here, maybe scale it in like this a little bit, like this, and then I could push it up here. I'm just going to try to put this on a different part of the head so you can see what's going on. Scale this thing down, and this could be our overall shape for the ear, and that would work pretty good. Maybe it's a little bit too thick for the thickness of it, like that. And then maybe we duplicate this thing again, push it down, and then scale this thing like this. And then maybe I push that down like that, maybe angle it a little bit, push it here. So that's going to give us the like wedge shape that we need. And then the other thing with this is, just because we have these shapes, like, let's say this isn't touching here all the way, and I've got to clean that up, I can put this on the move brush very easily, and then just start to manipulate this shape and then pull this down so it's touching here, and then maybe it's too far in here, so I just kind of pull that down just a little bit. Then I go to this part here, and I'm like, you know what, I would like the bottom to come down here a little bit more, and I want it to be like this shape. This is the power that we could have with the primitives, right? So we've looked at this before, that we would have to move this up, and we'd move this up. What we could do is we need to merge these things down. So if we went to merge and then we merge down, we can flatten those two together. But I'm just going to take this and I'm going to merge this down. I'm not going to merge it to the head. And I don't like how ZBrush does this. It turns off the visibility of things sometimes whenever you do this. I'm not sure why. I'm not even going to attempt to figure that out. But sometimes it turns the visibility off and you'll just have to turn that back on. So just be aware of that. Now I can go to geometry, we can go to our Dynamesh, and if I do a 128, then this is going to be a pretty low-res version of it, but then we can start to smooth out the results of that. And if we wanted to keep it nice and clean before we did the 128, let's pump that up to maybe 440 something in that area. Now when we smooth that out, you can see we've got a whole lot more polys to play around with and everything else like that. And then we could start to use the move brush and then really start to refine the shape a little bit more. So I just want you to be aware that there's different ways that we can get to a very similar result. Now I've been sculpting for quite some time digitally, and so just taking this mask and pulling this out and doing all the work I need to do for that, not quite as big of a deal. So if you struggle with the back of the ear, you might want to use this method. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that, get rid of it. I just wanted to show you that that's possible. But so you can see where I'm at here now. I would have to take Damien Standard. I would need to start to go here on the head and start to dig in around and through here and work my way around. Something like that. And I'm going to keep smoothing. We'll do something like that. And maybe I need to take clay buildup and hold down Alt and just start to knock away that surface a little bit like that, and maybe dig in a little bit more and through there. So you can see I'm trying to build that same shape that we just did with primitives, but I'm just doing it through a sculptural process. So it's not super difficult. I don't want to give the illusion that this is super hard to do, but you might find you like that other workflow a whole lot better. So I at least wanted to show that as a possibility, right? So I'm gonna move this around a little bit. I'm gonna tweak the shape of it, and then you might want to find yourself some decent reference of an ear from 360 degrees, and that's pretty easy to find on the internet these days. You could find some information on that pretty easily. I'm going to put this on Damien Standard. Now what I do know is if we took a look at this and you had your reference on here, it's going to kind of pull down right here like this, right? So what we're gonna, I'm gonna build a shape. We're basically gonna build a shape that's kind of like this, right? And if you thought about like a question mark, I've seen that used before like that. So I'm gonna pull around here for the ear like that. This does pull down quite a bit further, and then that starts to, I'm gonna put on the move brush, that starts to dip in like this at this angle, like that. And then I'm going to take Damien Standard. There's this piece of cartilage that sticks out right about here. And so I'm just going to build that up, and then I'm going to, with Damien Standard, dig in around here to build that as like a wall. And if you want to reemphasize that, hold down Alt, and you can pull that up like that. Okay, and then we got a little notch here, and you could think of this as a hole going in to the ear if you want. I could keep smoothing that, or smoothing it and then remeshing just a little bit. And if we keep going and remeshing, we can start to build, where's the ear hole for this. Okay, I'm not going to go too far with it. I'm going to go about there, and then remesh. Okay, and then now we've got, if we build this up, hold down Alt, and then build up a little hump here. So again, ears are going to be just like what we did with eyes. Everybody's got these different shapes, and you're not going to see this exact pattern all the time. But if you start to look at it, you might start to recognize it. So this pulls up and wraps around into there like that. This slides down and through here like that. And then you're probably going to get more meat of the surface down here like this. And if it's hard to make the shape, we can use the move brush. We can move that thing around. Sometimes for things like this, the inflate works pretty well. If we just need to blow that surface up there like that. And then what we've got is there's usually a split that happens somewhere around in here, and it continues up for the rest of this shape going along through here. And then there's a little notch that might go like this, and then maybe a notch that kind of goes like this on here. For a cartoon ear, this is probably a little bit much for detail, but we'll make it anyways. Just digging in through there like that. So this won't be the best ear out there, but I think this will give you a pretty good idea of some of the shorthand that you need to sculpt for this. Now there can pull this in like this, and you do want to continue the ridge of the ear. It goes back like that, and I'm kind of upside down now, but you will notice that this kind of travels in like that right there. And this is where I was saying it's kind of hard to sculpt this to get this in here and get the right angle for all this. I've done it enough times where I can get it done, but it does feel like a lot of pushing and pulling at that point. Okay, so I think that's working pretty good, and yeah, I think this will come in here. It kind of flows out like that. And again, where people's ears are different, you might have a lobe that comes up like this. Some people's just goes like straight down and connects to their head. So it's interesting, once you start building this stuff, you'll start to notice this on people, and you know, try not to be too creepy and stare at people, but you'll definitely start to notice some of these features. You can always go into the bathroom and take a look in the mirror and look at your own self if you don't want to alarm the people around you trying to figure some of this stuff out. Or go on the internet, and you could definitely find some reference out there. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much more time on this, so I'm just going to let that go. And so yeah, so there's some different shorthands on how you can build some of the different features on the face, and you can get that accomplished to start working on that. Okay, so I hope this was helpful, and it starts you on your quest to become a digital sculptor and make some cool and interesting faces.